You're listening to a Pop House Network podcast for developers by developers. Hey everyone, this episode is virtually special. For those who follow us know that around February, we usually are in Atlanta attending and causing trouble at DevNexus. This time though, while we couldn't be there in person, we joined DevNexus conference virtually, and thus, we still keep our tradition of being troublemaker at conferences. Within DevNexus, what we think is the best geek conference here in the US, and our regular sponsor Datadog for this episode. Today's show is sponsored by Datadog, a monitoring and analytics platform that integrates with over 400 technologies, including AWS services, Docker, and Kubernetes. Datadog's platform brings together metrics, traces, and logs in one place, so you can get full visibility into your environment and improve your application performance. With machine learning-based alerts, customizable dashboards, and distributed tracing, Datadog makes it easy to unify disparate data sources so you can troubleshoot faster. Start your free trial today. Listeners of this podcast will receive a free t-shirt once you install the agent and create one dashboard. Visit javaoffheap.com/Datadog to get started. Again, that URL is javaoffheap.com/Datadog. And without further ado, let's go to the conference floor and see what's going on. All right, so welcome everybody. This is Java OffHeap episode 59, and thank you for being here with all of us. We're doing this interesting thing. We are actually virtually at the DevNexus conference. We are actually sharing on the spatial chat and the OffHeap podcast room. And thanks everybody for being here. Hopefully you'll be entertained as much as us were being entertained just trying to figure all this technology out. And a couple of things. It's like first I want to thank DevNexus for being a sponsor for us, essentially letting us be on their space, being part of their conference. And giving us our own virtual chat room. The second person that I wanted to thank is Datadog, because they are actually sponsors of our podcast. And just go visit them out if you need sort of like APM metrics. They are actually very, very effective, and they're actually very fun to integrate with. My name is Freddie Guime. I'm a principal engineer at Expedia, author, speaker, Java champion, and I'm here with my usual suspects. So, Bob.
Hi, everybody. Bob Paulin, independent consultant from Chicago, Java champion, Apache Software Foundation member, CJUG board chair, and speaker.
Everyone, I'm Josh Juno. I am in Chicago. I'm Java EE, Jakarta EE developer primarily. Do lots of database administration as well. And I'm an author, speaker, Java champion, CJUG board member, and enjoy recording the OffHeap podcast. And thank you for coming today.
Hey everyone, I'm Michael Manella, member of the Spring Engineering team, Java champion, author, speaker, curmudgeon at large.
Yeah, and this podcast here, on this particular one, is extra special because we have two guest speakers that essentially fell for our trap and decided to actually be part of this episode. Billy, what do you tell us about yourself?
Hi, I'm Billy Corando. I guess it's on screen as William Corando.
So formal.
I know, very formal.
Have you listened to this
before? For OffHeap.
Have you listened to this stuff?
Anyways, I'm based in Kansas City. Also a speaker, actually currently between jobs right now. So when will this be published? I know obviously we have a bit of a guest here, but when do you think this will be published officially on the OffHeap? Tonight? Okay, I'll hold off.
Maybe tomorrow.
Tomorrow, I'll hold off then.
Depends how many beers Freddie has during the show.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm pretty looking forward to my next position, but I'll kind of keep it to myself for the time being. But it's going to be kind of fun here. But yeah, speaker also not quite as many awesome titles, but then I'll go and hand it off then to my good friend Chandra.
Oh yes.
Hey everybody. Hi, my name is Chandra. I'm a Java champion. I'm a GCP executive committee member representing my workplace. I've been programming Java for about a few years, since 98. I'm a jug leader at 2 Java user groups, the Garden State Java user group, New Jersey, where I'm from, and New York Java SIG. I am a big blogger and tweeter, so you'll find me on social media. So that's me, and let's get started with the program.
2
Chandra,
jogs, overachiever.
sightings. Yes. All right. So the first part we're just gonna go over some quick news items, and then let everybody opine on them if there is something to opine about. The first one that happened since the last time we recorded the podcast is that Jeff Bezos is stepping down as CEO of Amazon. Andy Jassy's taking over.
I personally thought that was interesting. Just the where they're going for the new guy. They're not going retail. They're not going e-commerce. He's a cloud guy.
You're surprised by that. I guess I kind of figured that's exactly where they'd be going.
I mean, isn't still the lion's share of their revenue e-commerce and retail? And I mean, with all the stuff they're doing with the new stores they're building, all the brick and mortar, all the new stuff that I'm aware of, the new strategical stuff is all not the cloud stuff. Cloud stuff's established. It's doing great, but it's also, granted, I haven't been through their financials in a while, but I thought that was still a drop in the bucket compared to the stuff they actually sell.
Yeah, I think that's right. I do kind of remember hearing some of the financials, and it is kind of it is a big number, 40 or 50 billion, or maybe more, maybe about 100 billion a year. But it's that's really nothing compared to what Amazon does every year. So yeah, it is kind of surprising.
Yeah, I would think it's the higher growth area though. So I mean, I just Googled it real quick. About 10% of revenue or sales is AWS, which makes sense. That's your drop in the bucket. But operating income increasing 37% from last year. Do you think e-commerce is doing 37%? Highly doubt that. So I mean,
no, but they're growing in other areas, right? They're opening up the grocery stores, the Amazon Freshes, and that kind of thing. I mean,
and not to mention their pharmacies. Amazon pharmacy is starting.
Yeah. So cloud seems to be established to me, unless it it just feels like all the real growth in new stuff is elsewhere. So that's no reason to surprise me. It's don't get me wrong, it's a serious business for Amazon, but if I were a shareholder, I'd want to make sure that they're executing on the sales side as opposed to the cloud stuff. The cloud stuff from a shareholder's perspective is still just a toy as far as numbers go.
Is it now? I mean, Amazon had I think a record year of revenue, right? Since the pandemic started, everybody was going there. Now that Bezos decides, so the question was was he asked to, or was it written inside the wall, you should step down, or was it? He apparently I have so much money. I'm done with this.
Apparently, he was upset that Elon Musk is ahead of him at SpaceX, and now he's going to spend more time with Blue Origin. I heard someone joking about that.
I'm gonna take my ball and play elsewhere.
Hey, you never know. Maybe he's going to go back into
Blue Origin. He's going to be CEO of Blue Origin now. Damn.
He's been talking about his interest in space and then setting out to external limits. So why not? Maybe this is opportunity to do that.
He is still considered the richest person in the world, right?
I think actually Musk took over for him or something. I guess that investment in Bitcoin or something.
Yeah, I mean, some of it's funny money, to be fair.
Well, it's Tesla. Tesla has been up by a ridiculous amount this past year.
Yeah, you look at the book value of that company, and I don't know. Oh yeah, it's funny money in my book, but other people may consider that actual wealth.
I want to see Elon Musk actually try and cash out on that.
Yeah, at least back to the why Andy Jassy. I don't follow Amazon or AWS super close, but at least kind of what I heard, I think Andy Jassy kind of has a very similar mentality to Jeff Bezos or something. He doesn't have the gravitas of having built the largest corporation in the world now, but I've heard that he's supposed to be kind of similar, and that might be kind of why they went with him versus someone else. But I'm not super familiar in the Amazon world, so I have no idea. Jeff Bezos is the only person I know.
I mean, but think about it. I mean, when you're talking about a market of human beings, how many people can I find that can run a global e-commerce operation versus how many people do I know that can successfully run a cloud operation? I think one of those pools is a lot smaller.
And what's that
than
e-commerce
the other.
operation running on?
At that scale, I would argue both of those are questionable. Like there's a handful of people on the planet that can do either one of those at Amazon is at.
Let alone both of them. Yeah. All right. Well, good luck for Vessa's new ventures, whatever those are. Next one, I think Bob you wrote this one in, right?
Oh, I got to look at that one. Oh yeah. So the Super Bowl happened, right? So we had the Super Bowl of the pandemic, and Billy, where'd you say you were from again? It sounded like
conversation.
Yeah, Billy.
Let us hear it again.
yeah.
I'm sorry. Where else was all the other teams in this talk? No, man.
I don't know. My
wasn't too
team
happy
actually
about
beat
it,
the
but,
Bucks
like-
during the season. So I mean, out here in Chicago.
So did we. Oh man, unfortunately it did not turn out that well, but I kind of got over it pretty similar to the way I got over when like the Royals lost in 2014, and that is every other team except for the team that won would have killed to have been in our position. So it's like, yeah, it's not fun to get like pretty well pounded and lose the Super Bowl, but
I don't know that I would agree with that assessment, but okay. You guys were pretty rough around the edges with your O line, so honestly, I put your loss on your offensive line and how beat up it was.
That's definitely true. That our O line, we were down. We only had one start at the start of the season that was starting the Super Bowl game, so that hurt. But I figured there's a chance we should be. I guess us maybe Green Bay fans are kind of like, oh, we'll be back there with Rodgers, and that hasn't happened yet. So I hope we'll be back with Mahomes, but we'll see. We won last year. We'll give other people a chance to, Tom Brady hasn't won enough Super Bowls, so we'll give him one more.
I was happy.
That's
to
the
see
one
the
thing I
Packers
never
didn't
get
make it
with
there,
though,
so.
when it comes to like football, it's like the team that loses a Super Bowl. Oh
It's happy to see the Packers don't make it.
Yep.
One of the things I never get though when it comes to the Super Bowl, when like after it's just kind of like the 49ers lost last year, and like I think was whoever lost the year before. It's like well, this team has to completely rebuild. Like she's had one bad game. Like the Bucks straight up beat us, but like I don't know if the takeaway is getting to the Super Bowl and losing is we got to rebuild. Like I mean, we need to do some work, like any team. But like I'm like, you just had like a bad game. Like it could have played 10 games. You could have like won a few more of them. But yeah, I always find that a little bit interesting. That it's like, yep, they had to rebuild. They're exploited. I'm like, really? I mean,
no, it didn't win that last game. Let's just throw everything away, right? All right. I remember that. I think we were tweeting when the game was going on. Like that it hurt. It did hurt. I was rooting for Kansas City. So
yeah.
I was just glad to see that Super Bowl trophy didn't go into the pond.
Well, if you drop that pass, you're not gonna forget about it. So
that's it. I've like really reduced my I have not seen any like reviews of the game. I'm like, nope. Like or like the parades. Like I'm not able to process that at this point.
Still in denial.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, and the other news that we have is actually interesting. JFrog is sunsetting JCenter, right? And I guess
BinTray more than JCenter, but
I say it's BinTray's actually the bigger
BinTray,
piece. Yeah,
BinTray is the bigger challenge. Yeah.
No,
but I mean, Freddie, before we move on, there may be viewers that don't know what JCenter is. You want to explain what that is real quick?
So that's essentially the other Maven repository, which apparently a lot of people publish to.
Yeah, I mean,
I
especially
wasn't
for
even
Gradle,
aware.
right? I mean, like I know I have Gradle plugins in there.
BinTray over say Maven Central because of the flexibility in doing so, right? They get an alternate site that does not have so many rules at this point and is actually quite highly available and trustworthy, right? It gives them a second option, and that's what always existed ever since BinTray came into existence. And it is not suddenly going off. There's a tapered, I guess, degradation cycle that they have established.
It's a
But
very
it is
aggressive
still a
one.
shocker for a lot of developers who have to now make changes to sort of redirect their artifacts to go to a Maven Central repository. So it's a bit of a shocker, but they've provided for means in which you can go through, and they've provided for unambiguous dates through which you can actually get off of, let us say, BinTray and go into Maven Central.
Has anybody heard? So if you're just releasing regular jars, it was never like you've always just been able to go straight to Central. I know the Spring team, we probably 50-50 or 60-40 that we would release to BinTray and then Central for a variety of reasons. So we're, scrambling, getting that addressed. But I thought one of the big things with this on the Gradle side was this was kind of the only place that the Gradle community stored plugins.
Yeah. So there is also.
So have you heard if? Sorry, go ahead.
No, please, Mike, go ahead. I just wanted to mention there's also Gradle Central that folk go to.
So yeah, I guess that was going to be my question: is what is the fallback, or have they figured out what a plan B is for Gradle plugin distribution?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, as far as regular artifacts, non-plugin artifacts go, Maven Central is probably the best source to get all your libraries and dependencies. But when it comes to Gradle plugins, I guess Gradle has to now sort of enhance the stability on their own Gradle Central that already exists, but is usually used as a backup, with BinTray being the primary. So that's something that I guess will require some amount of investment, both in terms of money and in terms of, I guess, TLC to ensure that it has a higher uptime. But, every single necessity is the mother of invention, and someone will come up with something to solve that problem. They cannot just leave that hanging.
Yeah.
That's my take.
I look at it as a redundancy problem. I mean, so you do have other places to put artifacts. I mean, there is disruption when you remove one of them. I almost equate it with Maven Central required HTTPS. There's a lot of repositories.
That was a small change. Well, technically, that was a small change.
A small change,
comparatively.
Yeah.
But it's the same kind of thing. Is you have a number of folks that downloaded the software where that was the default because for a while it just did HTTP. And once it stopped working, it's disruptive because people have to go in and they have to change the default. Now, Gradle, Maven, all of these build tools have it where you can change where the repositories point to, right? It's configuration, but the defaults that come down, it means you have to now kind of, hey, I got to Google, I've got to look up, where I got to repoint these things when I know, hey, this is where these artifacts that were exclusively in BinTray or JCenter are now at home.
One other thing I wanted to call out with this is while the dates are very non-ambiguous, they are rather aggressive. This was announced basically a couple weeks ago, with about 4 weeks worth of notice. With the original date, they've now extended the shutdown to 1 more month to the end of March for publishing artifacts, and I believe the end of May, if I'm correct, to completely pull the plug. This whole thing seems to be happening very fast, given the fact that JFrog just had an IPO last September.
Right.
So, this is they just got an infusion of cash, so it's obviously they're. Obviously, they weren't making money on this, or couldn't find a way to make money with it.
Right? I guess they're more answerable to their stakeholders and shareholders, and I guess P&Ls and ledgers are being looked at with more scrutiny. I don't know the exact facts why they made this change, but yes, I do agree with the fact that these dates look hyper aggressive compared to what any other place would do had they had the resources.
Yeah.
So two things. On May 1st, we'll figure out what breaks. And then
honestly, one thing we talked about internally is before then, it's probably a good idea to update our firewalls and just firewall
Just block it.
that site off.
Yeah. Lock it
Exactly,
off.
just block it just to see what breaks.
Yeah. No, I
No,
Yeah,
that's
it does
the
seem
particular
aggressive
alternative.
because it was 4 to 8 weeks before they start accepting new artifacts, and then now a year from like now till they just completely kill it. That does seem, for an enterprisey thing, that does seem like a pretty aggressive timeline. I don't know. I've generally just used Maven Central, but has there been any like indication that this was kind of coming down the pike, or is it just kind of catching everyone else kind of this by a bit surprise?
I've seen
I think
nobody-
it was. Yeah.
I've seen
It was
nobody
Phil
say-
that it was-
Yeah, I've seen nobody say that they or react like they were expecting this.
Yeah. Again, it's one of those corners of the internet where you just almost forget about it, right? Like you turn on the light switch and there's electricity, and it's like, all right, there's BinTray and JCenter.
I left those in Austin.
Yeah, no, I think it depends. In the cases where you're dealing with something like, if you're a Maven user, you're already usually pointing at Maven Central. So I mean, add JCenter is usually something that you have to do. So it probably depends. Is like, I'm a Maven user most of the time. So for me, it's only those projects that I know that I added JCenter to that I have to worry about. But if you're, a Gradle user where it's kind of there by, I believe it's there by default in Gradle.
Yeah.
Then you don't know what you don't know. Right.
Yeah. And I wonder, like, somebody was raising the point, and I think it goes to what you were saying about, we don't think about Maven, or not Maven. We don't think about Maven Central, but that is really now almost like the pin that holds like a billion build projects together.
Please don't be like NPM or
yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's what I
Right?
was thinking.
So a lot of corporate establishments, and I'm speaking from experience, do not actually rely on Maven Central.
Well, they
What
have.
do is, they
proxy.
create a mirror of the Central, and then they host all the things that they need locally. But that said, kudos to Maven Central for having been such a stable system for almost 15 years now. And
It's like, you don't hear about it. Like,
you
it's
never
just there.
actually hear a complaint about it.
yeah, it's there. If anything happens, it's usually the proxies that proxy it between you and Maven Central. But yeah, I agree. Like every big corp will have essentially its own cache, so it doesn't download everything from there. But again, there has to be a repository where you publish, that you hold the artifacts, that you vet people pushing, so it's one of those where it's the infrastructure of software development. It's almost like a very big part of software development, and it's great that it's working, but it is one of those where maybe it needs more TLC or redundancy, like Bob said, where we lost an alternative really now, so we just need to figure out. There's food for thought. It really,
Basically, what we're saying is Sonatype can't go public.
I think it's a great opportunity for Amazon
We
to
should
show
have a
how
chat
cheap
with Brian
storage
Fox.
is.
Yeah.
Apple IPOs.
Hey, that's an idea. We should invite Brian Fox over to an OffHeap.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. If you're listening, love to have you on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so S3 artifacts, cheap on the gas, expensive on the puts. So. All right, next story. OpenG9 is only source and no binaries. Who wrote this? That was
Michael that added that, right?
Probably. So the Eclipse Foundation. So Adopt OpenJDK is moving to the Eclipse Foundation as Adoptium. And as part of that, historically, Adopt OpenJDK has also released the binaries for OpenJ9. Eclipse Foundation, as part of their whatever deal is behind them taking over Adopt, is going to require that any Java distribution that they release be TCK'd,
Yep.
which means you've got to pay the Oracle TCK tax essentially to make that happen. OpenJ9 has never done that.
Yeah.
And so because of that, Eclipse has said that they will not release the binaries of OpenJ9. So right now, there's nobody volunteering to release those binaries. So you'd have to build. If you want to use OpenJ9, you basically have to build it yourself.
There's something interesting to this. So the TCK actually applies to the binary and not to the source code. And that's something
Right.
a very few set of people know. So you may have written the perfect Java code that sort of maps to your Java specification yourself. You created your own Java implementation, all fine and dandy. But unless your final binary distribution actually checks against the TCK, you're not considered actual Java. So you cannot put the label of Java on it. And that is something that a lot of folk miss. And Adoptium, due to some constraints that they and Oracle had disagreements with, did not actually sign up to the TCK agreements. And now we've come to a situation where we have a binary that is not TCK compliant for reasons that are not technical. And the binary comprises of source code that is fully Java compliant. So what do? Eclipse has chosen a neutral path of releasing the source code as a source zip file that you can compile on your own to create your own Java binaries. So once there is no distributable java.exe or equivalent in your binary, you're not required to actually be TCK compliant.
Yeah.
That was
and
Has-
also
has-
just to provide a little bit more background as to what it is. So TCK stands for Test Compatibility Kit, and it's basically a series of tests that Oracle has put together that determines it's like this is what you're expecting to have happen if you're to be running a Java application. Like there's the API, which that's what is actually how OpenJ9 is defined. Because Java's open source, there's the available APIs. So what's all supposed to happen, and so OpenJ9 is built to it. But then there's this whole test compatibility kit that then says, does this all actually happen? Does it have all these expected things? But also with that then is you have to pay Oracle for that. And then kind of is, as you were saying, Chandra, that's what actually allows you to call Java. If you don't actually run that TCK and then also pay the associated fee with running it. That's what makes it Java. So just wanted to provide that a little background to people who may not also be super familiar with this specific stuff, or that there's even other JVM options out there besides Hotspot. Though I guess people are kind of getting a bit more familiar with Graal VM out there.
That's interesting because I presume that OpenJ9 name was done on purpose. Like
so OpenJ9. So I, as an ex-IBM employee, actually one of the things I did talk on fairly regularly was OpenJ9. And of course, it's a name that I had to explain a lot. Like literally in my presentation, I'm like, what does OpenJ9 mean? So it technically doesn't have anything to do with Java. So what it was is it was based, it's a VM that was based upon Smalltalk. And the VM and the developers of that VM were then tasked with building a VM for a JVM for Java. And it was originally designed for like embedded applications and like those really old Nokia smartphones, like way back in the day. So like a very low powered environment.
Smalltalk does have a K8 operating system VM, and J9 was a take on K8.
Yeah, exactly. And so,
yuck.
And so, like it seems too serendipitous to be true, but at least at the time, what they went with J9 is because the VM developers thought that Java was a step back from Smalltalk. So J becomes for K, but they thought the VM was going to be a step forward. So that's why it's 9. So, but again, it's a bit serendipitous that it's also J as in Java, but technically Java isn't technically in the name of OpenJ9. But yeah, it's a name that was frequently talked about that really needs to be changed, just because people are like, oh, is that to do with Java 9? I'm running, Java 8, or I'm running to run Java 11. So Yeah.
17. Yeah.
I'm too
here
familiar
actually-
with this conversation.
Hey, anything to do with small talk, count me in.
Has anybody here actually built J9?
Or any
How hard
JDK
it
for that
is?
matter.
No, I've built JDKs
I
before.
built J9. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, as a credit to the Adopt movement and again, the Open JDK team
There are
together, like the
tons of
instructions
yeah.
are
Yeah.
very straightforward now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it doesn't take like a rocket scientist to build the JDK anymore.
Do they use Docker? Like, I thought they were using like a Docker step at some point in time, or maybe that was in Windows.
You know what? I don't know. I mean, I built it on, my laptop. So, I mean, I don't need Docker to build a JDK. Like, I think most folks, the way they've written the instructions, I think most developers would actually be able to do it. Now, Windows is a little tricky because you have to install some tooling, but with Linux, like they've actually got it. Command. Yeah, it's line by line, just run this, run that, run that. It's built. It'll make your fan run a little. It's a pretty expensive compilation.
Yeah, it's basically, I mean, it's like 5 steps on the Mac, and the 5th step is testing it. So it seems like it is pretty quick.
But yeah, I mean, what's interesting is you have a lot of the implementations or releases, and Adopt used to release a binary, and again, it was just a convenience binary that is not going to be released anymore, which is kind of interesting.
No, Adopt is going to be releasing a binary. OpenJ9 is not.
Yeah.
Okay, so Adopt is.
Yeah,
but Adopt is under Eclipse now.
Right,
So-
as part of his Adoptium. Adoptium is going to release a binary. They are not going to also release the OpenJ9 binary.
So when
on there you can
Okay.
choose which.
I was confused on that. I didn't realize
Yeah.
that.
So
Okay.
They had Hotspot on there also.
Yes, no, they did. They had both.
There are 2 virtual machines Adopt can run on. There's the hotspot, and then there is the OpenJ9. The hotspot version is fine and will continue to be released as a binary. It's the OpenJ9 that is no longer TCK compliant, and it would not be released as a executable binary. It's just a source binary you get.
Correct.
So what this mean is that, okay, so the question that everybody will worry, will this be available in SDK, man? Like that's...
No, you probably had to
No
manually
way.
add it. Yeah, you probably had to build it and then add it to your SDK man, or
Which-
I like to use JN, but yeah.
Which that kind of thing starts to beg the question: is what is the long term life on OpenJ9 now?
Yeah,
is this,
right.
Is this the first nail?
Is this a killer?
Exactly. So that's
What is the opposite of? They say the opposite of love is not hate, is disinterest.
Yeah, and one of the things that is kind of interesting with OpenJ9, at least compared with the other JVMs out there, is that it's a complete soup to nuts rewrite of the JVM. Whereas like Corretto and Azul, like they're all building off Hotspot upstream, but OpenJ9, it's completely a re-implementation. Like I said, we're just talking about it. It's based off K8. So it's complete underlying re-implementation of the JVM. So like that, it would be, I don't know what the long-term plan is there, but it is interesting that you have somebody that's kind of complete re-implementation of the JVM, whereas some of these other ones are just slight retweakings of Hotspot.
Makes you wonder if Google would have used OpenJ9.
Yeah,
instead of
right.
Harmony.
I'm thinking about that, right? Because Liberty and Android were clean room implementations theoretically, right? And then the sequence, what is like, and an organization, what is it like? A sequence, structure, and organization. The SSO is where Oracle won the lawsuit against Google, right? So is maybe the reason of the TCK is not necessarily to pay the fees, but to not get into the legal waters of what like OpenJ9 can run into, because this is already there's precedent, right? Like this happened to Google and Android.
Yeah, that's right. I kind of forgot about that, the whole thing with the Google and Android back in the day.
Yeah, no, and theoretically it was same
Is
real.
Android still really Java though? Because like I've
No,
known
they
it's kind of
rewrote it.
evolved it since then.
They rewrote it. They
Yeah,
they basically kicked that off once once they realized the lawsuit was not going to be a slam dunk in their favor. Like, okay, we need to rewrite this thing.
So Android has gone mostly Dalvik and Kotlin for now. So
Kotlin as well.
they're
Swift, isn't it?
Yeah,
Oh, no, Swift, no,
disambiguated-
Swift is Apple.
they've disambiguated themselves from Java, but they use the JVM, which is totally fine. It's a GPL with class path exception version 2, which allows you to do that, right? You can have a distributable JVM that is totally fine. So that's what Android is following. And I know a lot of other technologies also do this now. So was, I guess, the whole Adoptium model supposed to be. The only challenge was that they decided to call themselves Java, but they were not following the TCK approval process. That was the only difference.
Mm.
We'll have to see what happens.
All right.
Yeah,
So,
no.
folks, I had to turn on my megaphone in the spatial chat. So we are collectively broadcasting through my computer right now. I just wanted to let you know. None of you could be heard without me turning on my megaphone.
Thanks.
That's why everybody's
Probably a lot
clustered
more
around Chandra.
interesting to be in there now.
No, thanks.
Chandra
Jonathan.
wants all the
He
attention.
pointed that out. Had to
He
turn
wants
on
to
my
be
computer.
close. All right. And next on the item list, JDK 16, the issue with symmetry. The streams to list returns on a modifiable list running like a list. Who brought this one up?
Yeah, that was probably me. My apologies. JDK 16 is quite interesting. It's amazing. They've added a few new features. They've solidified the records in JDK 16. Seal types are now a second preview. I guess text boxes come out of preview. A lot of fancy changes come in 16. In addition, what they've introduced is a new shortcut method on streams to do a to-list. So if you ever write a streams block to iterate over a stream and do some operations, intermediate operations, and you terminalize that with a collectors.toList, right? They've sort of shrunk it down to a streams.toList operation. So you no longer need to call a collectors.collect toList. You can actually call a streams.toList as a inline fluent method. The only challenge with that method is it has sort of lost its fluency. While the Java doc spec very clearly says that it can potentially lose its, expected and desired output, but it is definitely going to be something that does not meet the principle of least astonishment, because it does produce an output of an unmodifiable list rather than a regular mutable list that we are used to seeing. So that's a change. I just wanted developers to be aware of that change. Now, they have not broken any spec in doing so. It is just unexpected. And that is something a lot of folk do not immediately know, but when they see the method, they would not realize it right away. It's not going to give them any compile time issues. It's a runtime issue should they try to mutate that list. So I just wanted to have a discussion on that.
Do you know if there's a technical driver for that, and if so, what it was?
I believe the technical driver was to push towards more functional style programming and introduce more immutability in the programming language. That's what I have inferred from all the communications we've had across the GCP Executive Committee, various channels we've reached out to on the OpenJDK fora, and I guess individual discussions we've had with several experts. But
I mean,
it's just that developers may be caught unawares, and we just wanted to highlight this, that if you were to switch to using from the collectors.toList, longer mechanism of, terminally concluding your stream operation to the new streams.toList, expect a change that your new list object will be unmodifiable, which is somewhere between immutable and not immutable. Right.
Yeah, no, so just to address your initial driver is I know when I just started using streams, having to put the collector at the end did seem like it was kind of like, okay, this seems like extra code that I'd love to remove if possible. And it seems like that's kind of the idea behind it. And I guess I can see where immutability might come from. I know a lot of the collections utility methods or arrays utility methods are often pushing out unmodifiable arrays or collections when you use them. And they've been around so long that that's just expected. But I know based on other ways that I've used those stream APIs, I agree. It does seem like an unexpected outcome to get the unmodified list with just a to list. I almost feel like the more expressive way to do that would be to unmodifiable list rather than to list, because my default mode in my head is that if I'm getting a list, making it unmodifiable is a decorator to it, not a default behavior.
That's very fair. That was our initial expectation as well. But yeah, it happened. And the spec does actually allow for this ambiguity. So we cannot actually stake a claim against it. Right? The spec says you cannot expect the output not to change. Mm-hmm. So it's as clear as that. But it's just a surprise for the developers who use this. So we just wanted to share that here.
Yeah, it is interesting because like when you read the collectors to list, it's like they say you cannot assume any particular list implementation for this method.
Correct.
And then and I guess that might have been a degree of freedom that they want to gain back, because it is like, on most trivial cases, like you get an array list, who cares? Like that's fine, right? Yep. Linked list, but once you start dealing with lists that have millions to million records, there might be certain things that you do want to control. You shouldn't just do collectors to lists. You should actually command exactly how you want that to be done. And maybe that's the thing that they sort of like run into where what, an unmodifiable list is very easy, like almost like I guess it's still there might be still implementation details that can make it more efficient or less efficient. Well, the only thing I can think is like it might not fit on an array list, because and that would be the only reason that you have an unmodifiable array list versus a modifiable linked list. But yeah, so it's one of those. Yeah, we're gonna be stuck with it forever. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and then I think the bigger problem is the binary incompatibility it produces to other libraries who have since streams implemented a to list, right? So that is something to be more aware of, more than the immutable versus mutable discussion, which is quite trivial.
Can they do that as a default method on the interface?
Yeah, so they can. And the moment you create a default method on streams with a to list, and you have an implementation that also does that, you run into what is the diamond problem, right? Now
no, it should pick the, it should ignore the interface one, right? That's the whole point of default methods.
So if you have two methods in the chain that have the same, you actually have to specify which one you're picking up.
No, the default methods. They're default if there's nothing there.
Correct. But what if you have a default method in a further interface of your own, in your own library?
Correct. If you have two default methods, then you're screwed.
Correct. So that's when the common problem steps in, and that's where binary incompatibility. I know Juke, Jooq, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Eclipse collections and a few other libraries will immediately get impacted by this, right? The mere fact that there are other collection hierarchies in these libraries that actually have created helper methods is now going to suffer, I wouldn't say suffer, at least have a challenge with having to change their default implementation to point to one of the two interfaces that they would like to go to.
What was that, Bob? Is that the multi-version jars that
multi-release jars?
Multi-release jars. But I'm not actually making the connection. What are you getting at with the multi-release?
So what happens is Chandra's problem is that there is libraries that actually implemented or have interfaces that have default methods that collide with the default method that is going to be introduced by the new collections. So essentially that is a binary incompatibility, meaning like you cannot do that. That's a syntax error, right? You cannot have two interfaces with exactly the same default method and both of them sort of having a concrete object extending both.
Yeah. So you're saying that the libraries are going to have to build out a multi-release where the new one basically removes the default method.
Correct.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. No, that That could be a maintenance issue.
Yeah.
You have, I mean,
Yes.
to use the multi-release functionality, multi-release jar functionality, you have to re-implement the entire class. So it's a copy-paste issue.
Correct. It is.
You're not
Yeah.
And it's a dual
just
maintenance
fixing.
aspect.
Mhm.
Unless we have like default interfaces, and we just go turtles all the way down, right?
Well, maybe there's an enhancement needed, because I know I was actually messing around with Graal the other day, and it has the ability to annotate and substitute methods without re-implementing the entire class with a substitute annotation. So you can, if you're compiling something to Graal, I can say, hey, take this method and take reflection out of it, so that I don't have any of the, have to worry about giving any of the hints or anything to Graal, or maybe there's something that's using JNI and I don't want to use JNI in that case when I'm on Graal. I can edit that out with a substitute annotation. I wonder if maybe the multi-release jar needs a little bit more love there to get something like that.
Some kind of per method annotation.
Yeah, where it's just like,
That's
instead of,
interesting.
hey, use this class, use just this method. And then the rest of the class is good.
So there is definitely a cheat that we use with, let's say, with Maven. You can actually shade a jar and eliminate one single class out of it and replace it with your own class.
Yep.
Using a
Yeah,
shade.
yeah.
And that's kind of
You just don't depend on the file system order for these things. That's how we usually do it.
get rid of it.
Oh gosh.
What
that's
other
been-
black magic can we introduce to make
Oh my
things
gosh.
work?
like files like you would have actually Bob may know about this, because I think we worked together on this for a little bit. Like, there used to be a program that was completely unreproducible locally, and it was exactly that. It was like a Linux file system. It walked the file path 3 in a certain way, hitting the right class first and loading that on. But when we tried to do it, when we tried to do it locally, or the other way around, when we tried to do it locally, because the class path was different, it will hit the class that we should be hitting first, and loading that one up. But that was such an extraneous bug, and that was just essentially file system. It was, that was file system dependent. So
Yeah.
I think I remember running into something like that once or twice. Also, those are just kind of like,
Those are like-
the nice thing about those though is, like, at least it ends up being like, okay, there's no way you would have known it. It's actually a difficult thing, instead of like, oh, I put like an extra period here, or I had a tab when I wasn't
I've been
expecting.
editing
And
this
then you're
YAML
like,
file
oh my
for-
god, I wasted 3 days because of this. Like, it's like, okay, I could never anticipate it. Like, that's at least it's like time like well spent, and not something just like super ridiculous that you
Yeah.
can.
At the end, you learn you learn something, not just that you're not an infallible human again.
Yeah, exactly.
oh my gosh.
Yeah, I remember I lost like 2 or 3 days because I put an extra hyphen in a YAML file. Like, I was just
God.
looking
And
through
then-
everything, and then I found out like I put like 4 hyphens instead of the 3 to separate like 2
Oh my
objects. I'm just kind of
gosh.
like, oh.
Then you get Bruno Borges coming in as like the
He's
YAML
there.
police.
You can almost imagine Bruno
Bring
standing-
back XML.
Yeah.
Let's bring back COBOL where spaces matter. Yeah. we did
Oh.
that.
Bring back XML.
or Python.
It's
Oh
probably
my
a good
gosh.
thing to say that this would be a good time to start trying out JDK 16, right? Because
Yeah.
it's in the
It's in release candidate phase. Yep.
Yeah, so I'm currently working on JDK 17. I'm working on Lanai and Loom. So yeah, and now JDK 16.
He's like with the cool
Wow, you had
kids
to
living with
downgrade to go to JDK 16.
Yeah.
Man.
the- yeah. That's how bleeding edge Chandra
yeah,
is.
bleeding edge.
Yeah, I know.
You don't have a choice.
It's like the sharks. I need to be in the bleeding
I
edge
wanna
or I
be the first one to
die.
complain.
I'm
It's
curious.
always about who's the first one to complain, and
Yeah.
and that's got to be me.
Mhm.
So I'm part of what is known as the Quality Outreach Program at Oracle. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that. So essentially, anytime there's a change in Java, we're reached and they basically ask us to run our open source projects against the newer versions of Java to ensure that nothing is broken. And that's how we find out these issues, right? Be it with the binary incompatibilities this time, or in the past with, let's say, string adding new methods. we find out binary incompatibilities very quickly with anything that's going on because we're a part of this quality outreach. If you're not using quality outreach, you should definitely check them out.
Spring Framework and Micrometer both contribute to it.
That's awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Spring Framework anyway. So, yes.
I'm seeing in the space though that like Good and Unprepared was saying they're still on 8. I'm just curious because like I've been now kind of most of the time when the new Java release cycle has started, I've actually been in the developer advocacy space and mostly just been doing kind of POC stuff. Like what has been the like when it comes to like enterprise development, like what's been the kind of view on the like uptake of post Java 8? Like is a lot like I know there's a couple of people said they're on 11. Is anybody actually trying to keep with like a current like release? Like is anybody actually on 15 right now or like
I'm not sure which application server containers would support, 15. Certainly there are a couple that support 11 at this point, but the majority of them are still obviously 8. I think there are newer versions of such as like Priora that you can use 11 with.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if we're going to see a huge migration post 8 with Java 17 later this year. That there's going to be enough of a carrot and syntactic sugar out there to kind of really get people to go there, because there's been like a lot of maybe FUD, maybe real reason around like JPMS with Java 9, and there wasn't a whole lot in Java then 10 or 11 that, it doesn't seem like a whole lot of people have moved to Java 11 yet. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see what happens when, JDK 17 comes out here later this year.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's some work. I mean, it takes build tool knowledge in order to kind of move it up with a lot of the, especially if you're working with web services, because those are things that have been now removed from the JDK and you need to pull them in as dependencies and
oh gosh,
Java it's not things most Java developers are doing in their day-to-day. It's one of those kind of one-time things you set up in your build jobs, and that's I think why some of it's difficult, even if you're not using JPMS.
No, and I think it also depends how like deep into the weeds it gets, right? Like if you're still using object serialization and for whatever reason you need to be bytecode compatible to like something that is downstream, like your old library that does something and nobody knows it's that old deprecated, source control system perforce, and you have to like sort of like move that machinery, and you're like, if I touch this, everything falls down, and that's essentially what sometimes I see like pockets of 8, where it work, most of them, everybody wants to move away, but sometimes it's like just the amount of it. The only way you move away from it is when the libraries that required on that stop supporting it, or you do have like security concerns that, I'm running, whatever Spring Boot version 1.5. And that means that I have more holes that I created.
Cover your ears, Michael.
Actually, so with start.spring.io, we obviously keep stats on all kinds of things, and I actually just pulled up what versions of Java people are generating projects with, and 11 is the majority right now. Yeah. I think it switched when we switched the default. I'd have to double check that. 8 is I would argue a close second. 15 is a rounding error, and then you get everything else.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing.
I do expect 17 to be kind of the big shift, the big
the motivator of sorts to move. So the way we do it in corporate worlds is essentially we move across LTSs. We don't do feature release, migrations. So when 11 came out, 8 and 11 will continue to be supported. When 17 comes out, guess what happens to 8? So we only do 2 version support, and people will be motivated, encouraged, or pushed to move to a newer release, and they will have to start finding out issues. We do create some sort of a compendium of knowledge on how they can transport, but that's where it.
Careful about referring to the non-LTS releases as feature releases. I hear Mark Reinhold and Brian Guess will beat you up if you say that too many times. If you say it 3 times fast.
he'll pop in.
For 6 months, right?
Well, no, and that is one of the things I noticed. Like even when I was like itching to try like 13, the problem is like libraries and the ecosystem is not there. Like 17, I know that because it is an LTS, like, people like Chandra are very busy making sure that things are ready for what is being released. So those are easier for me to like make the case. Okay, let's move it. It'll be a little bit painful, but we're almost sure that anything we need fixed will be fixed.
It's not only that it's 17's an LTS, but 17 also is the first LTS since we started the new release cycles that has language features that developers are actually willing to move for.
Yep.
Like 11 was nothing more. It actually, the expectation was it was going to be harder, right? Because it was the JVM was more locked down. They took away access to things, and so there's a high risk of breaking things.
And there's no more CRE.
Yep.
Right, and they're like you risk breaking things, and yet you're not from a language feature perspective, you're not getting a lot. And so 17 is really that first one where it's like, hey, there's something I want, so it's worth upgrading for. And I think all the libraries are going to follow suit with that as well. But 17 is going to be the real baseline going forward. 17 is going to be the new 8 for a little, I bet.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah,
let's hope.
I think I am pretty excited by some of the projects that are finally really coming to fruition. Kind of like Project Amber is a pattern matching. Is that the
yeah,
right?
For the Switch and the
I think that's going to be something that's going to be nice, just because one of the big knocks against Java is it's very verbose and syntax happy, and having to do like if variable instance of then cast it to, and then all that, like a lot of that's going to kind of go away with the new pattern match and stuff, and that's going to be really nice. I think that's going to be something that a lot of developers will kind of prefer. Because I remember it's just like, why am I having to type this all?
No, that's true. All right. The one thing I want to move on to, I think this is going to be a fun discussion once 117 is actually released, and then we'll go back and revisit, see how that is going. But one of the now that we're done with the news part of our podcast, the one thing that wanted to sort of like get into the gear mindset, right? Like is as Java developers, right? Like there is a big, there's always been this thing about like, how do you progress in your career? How do you go from junior to senior? How do you, get better at what you do, right? And it's something that we all, as engineers always want to do, right? And I know like, so we wanted to take this space just to like talk a little bit about that and like how do we do career development, or what are the, not necessarily tips and tricks, but what is the advice that we can give or share our experiences of career development?
And I think it's interesting because last year we had Gene Borski on from the New York Java SIG talking about education coming in to kind of, hey, getting your first role and kind of progressing in the early ones. So I would almost, when we came up with the discussion topic, we almost wanted to target the opposite end of the spectrum, is what does it take to kind of get to that really senior, or maybe even if you would consider the highest engineering position in your org, just to put an interesting spin on it. Freddie, are you good? If I add that requirement to the discussion? Because I know we did kind of the entry level thing last year. If we want to talk the other end of the spectrum, I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean, and like, and I have tons of opinions in this, and I bet you do. So I'm gonna let everybody start first. How do you guys think that somebody can go to that senior level? Like, what would you say is something that's desirable on people to grow on that path?
Okay, so I'm gonna just say very small sentences because I work in a large corporation. The ability to say no without hurting someone senior to you is probably the most important thing you can learn, and that will get you set, right? And the ability to say yes with confidence when you can, when someone senior is doubting you, is the second best thing you can do to improve your career in a large corporation. These are two very important things. Say no when you feel that you are under pressure, and say yes when there is doubt against you being able to deliver. Get those two going, figure out ways to actually get that message, be confident. And probably a distant third is have your elevator pitch ready. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse, but I want to emphasize on this. Have your elevator pitch ready. When you meet somebody senior and they have exactly 3 minutes to give you, have your story ready. Be able to tell them what you do, why you are relevant, is probably the three most important things I have learned from my mentors in my journey. And I'm sharing this because those were absolute great milestones for me to achieve.
Yeah. To kind of, I mean, just maybe add emphasis to what you're saying there, Chandra, is that communication skills, like I think for a while, maybe it's getting a little bit better, but I think for a while there was an idea that what really mattered to the developer is like their engineering credentials, like, just how well they can write code essentially. But really, communication skills are at least as important, maybe more important, but definitely, it no less than 45, 55 that, because, and it's not even just about like also like the elevator pitch, which is, I think is also incredibly important, but you're having to take business requirements, whatever they may be. And it's going to be important to be able to kind of communicate and be like, or at least kind of understand, like, if something doesn't make sense or, something can kind of be worked better, to actually kind of then work back with like whoever would make sense at your organization to maybe how it could be improved or how it can be changed to actually kind of work better versus just blindly trying to like implement that into your code base. It's just something very critical that you kind of have to learn to maybe, speak up, but then also just how to communicate that as well.
Yeah, to build on that, to get to the highest levels of engineering in any company I've ever been involved with, it's not good enough just to be a good engineer. It's at those levels, it's not purely about who writes the best code.
Yep.
At those levels, that's not what it's about. It's about, can you influence other people? Can you convince other people in non-confrontational ways that your ideas are the best? And also business acumen. So how does that code actually generate customer value? How does it generate business value? How do you move the needle from a business perspective? Because again, when there is a threshold where you kind of cross over, where it goes from being where the code you write is the most important thing to where your ideas are the most important thing. And in order to cross that chasm, you need that communication capability. You need to be able to influence people. And those are the ways, that most developers struggle, to be honest with you. Like that is a chasm for a lot of people. It is that ability to influence people in ways that, still make everybody feel good at the end. And like, there are people that I can think of off the top of my head that I've worked with that like are amazing at it. I mean, it like they're great at leading people down a path to think that like they thought up the idea when it was really their idea going into the meeting. And I'm just like, you're a witch, like you are a wizard. Like, how do you do this? But those capabilities, like if you can do those things, if you can like, make friends and influence people, right? That like,
Dale Carnegie. Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly. But in order to get to those top levels, you need to be able to do it.
Yeah. I think to some extent also is, at least at some point in your career, I know I felt victim, at least early on, is you do want to make sure you kind of move around, at least if not between organizations, at least within your organization, so like different departments, different business units or something, just to kind of get that broader vision. Because sometimes if you stay in like the exact same kind of role and position for too long, you get a very, very narrow set. Someone who helped mentor me, early in my career, like he did like consulting, he just worked with many different organizations all around the world. If you really just want a good approximation, I know a number of people here, Ted Neward, just basically imagine him as very similar to him. But anyway, someone who has experience across many different organizations who is able to get like that broader vision of maybe kind of what's going on. Whereas if you stay too narrowly within like the same role or same department, same business unit, you may get like a very narrow focus and not maybe understand some of the broader things. So that can also be really important towards, if you want to stay within your same organization, you're towards your advancement, or maybe more broadly, definitely it's good to kind of get the view of many different organizations on how they try to approach things.
Yeah, and I think that just to even focus on a couple of those things is when you're talking about those extremely senior roles, they don't always exist in every single silo of your organization. Sometimes you have to be able to move around and be flexible to find those roles. Sometimes there's companies that may not even have a principal slot to them. So you have to be open to, kind of looking around and finding where those opportunities lie. Yeah. Usually if it's a big enough company, they're going to have that role because they're going to have that need to scale and have that senior person that can make those decisions and advise leadership to get those results. But being able to influence inside, and even sometimes it's outside your organization, coming to the conferences and being able to talk with people, find out what other people are doing and bring ideas from outside the organization into the organization, is tremendously valuable. And people, being in consulting, people, that's one of the things you bill for is that, hey, I've been to a bunch of other places and I've seen this problem here and this is what worked with it. And this is what's different in your situation. This is what might work for you, and having perspective on things. Yeah. But it all still comes back to that value creation in those senior roles, because if you don't deliver something that is financially tangible, it's hard to justify the salaries that a lot of these roles do. And when you're in consulting and you're billing a rate, it's really easy to cut that cost off and be like, all right, we're just not going to pay Bob anymore. So being able to create value, I think is hugely critical to those senior roles. So being able to align yourself to I did this created this money or this situation, which was beneficial to our company financially, is super critical.
No, and a lot of organizations also, like you were saying, Bob, don't actually have that. Like a lot of, really, until I joined IBM, that was the first organization I've been with that actually really had these really senior distinguished engineer, principal engineer kind of stuff, kind of roles. Everything else I've been to before, they weren't technology focused organizations necessarily. Of course, they obviously had IT, but it would kind of top out at like lead architect or something like that, or head architect, and it didn't truly have like a formal path around it, like some other organizations, like your FANG organizations or Oracle, IBM, and others, where you would have like, you have to do these specific things. And it's also sometimes when you do get to those specific requirements for like some of those at like some of those really large organizations, it's good to have that conversation early or get an idea early on as to what's involved, because sometimes there can be very specific things. I know, at least when I was with IBM, I was kind of looking to like, they have like these 3 senior roles: STSM, which is senior technical staff member, DE, distinguished engineer, and then fellow. And like you had to have like a patent published, and stuff like that. You had to have maybe like some sort of like publishment, kind of some stuff like that. And it's important to, if you want to go for those, and there is some of those specific criteria, have it, that conversation early on and get an idea early on, or if there's mentorships and stuff, kind of get that going, just so that you're not like 3 or 4 years in and like, wait, I want to go farther. And now you find out you have to have like these 4 or 5 requirements that aren't necessarily trivial to accomplish. It's not like, take this training course and you're good. Like you may have, it's something that may take like 6 months to a year plus to kind of accomplish. So like sometimes when it gets to also be like that, it can be good to know ahead of time, what that looks like. So you're not kind of like suddenly stalled out for a few years while you maybe check those things off to get to that next to level you want to get
Well,
to.
that's interesting. One thing I would ask, Billy, especially with your experience and saying, hey, I've been in those organizations that don't have that role. And this could be a question for anybody in the group, really.
Yeah.
What do you do in that situation other than, I mean, obviously maybe leaving is a thing, but
Yeah.
is there ways for somebody to try to gain some of that experience while I'm still there? Or is it leaving the only option?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess by the time I left, before I came to IBM, I worked as a consultant like you did, Bob. So like at that point, it's a very horizontal organization. It's just like, oh, either you're a junior consultant or senior consultant. There wasn't really much more. And maybe within the organizations, I was maybe embedded with, I would maybe be sometimes like a senior software engineer or maybe an architect role. I'm not quite sure if I could give good insight just because it was so much comparatively early in my career. I was either like like a junior engineer or a mid-level engineer that kind of getting to that, starting to get that talk of principal engineer or anything like it. Just probably wasn't even something I was even thinking about at the time. So unfortunately, I can't give great insight. Maybe someone else could.
What is it that they say? If you walk into the room, you're the smartest person in the room. That essentially means you're in the wrong room. Like,
so you're a leave advocate too, Freddie?
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, I would say definitely I'll probably be more a lead advocate than anything, just to kind of get, like I said, you just need to get that additional experience outside of it. You just need probably multiple organizations you've kind of worked with. I mean, some very large organizations, you can actually legitimately get some really different experiences across it. Like IBM, like it was so large, like you could have completely different like experiences from different teams, and completely like different concepts that you're working on. But that's probably not the general for most, but yeah, really large organizations, you kind of may get like a good opportunity to really get different experiences. But I don't know, I'm generally like a lead advocate, go somewhere else, get a completely different perspective on how people approach it, because that's going to give you the best growth opportunity.
Interesting. No, I mean, when I asked the question, I just kind of assumed, you're a conference speaker.
Yeah.
When you do things in open source, those are external organization opportunities. And I guess, let me ask it in point. Did you feel that like helped you in getting to organizations that maybe had some more of those senior roles that you're looking at?
Yeah. I mean, that speaking and doing some little bit of open source work, not much compared to many other people in here, definitely led to like being my previous role at IBM and my future role also, which is still in the DevRel space, that, without that I wouldn't have got it. And that's maybe to what your point was, is that I kind of realized at some point that I kind of really wanted to kind of get into conference speaking at least. So I kind of, actively sought that stuff out, which of course then required kind of going outside of, what you're doing with your organization. But then, and also I guess even for me, like as a consultant, like that wasn't really a big business opportunity for a consultant, small boutique consultancy company in Kansas City. I remember I got like invited to do the Lava One way back when it was still called Lava One. Now it's called Unbox Hawaii. I'm like, I tried to pitch. I'm like, so are we looking for some business in Hawaii? Unfortunately not. So I actually had to, make that a bit of a vacation trip as well.
But no, and I think that it's interesting because there are so many sort of like shortcuts, and I keep telling this to like whoever I can shout and scream it at, right? Like the moment that, for example, you sort of like volunteer in your local Java user group, that's how it starts, right? Like if you manage to get in there, you start getting exposed to all these sort of like ecosystem and community, right? And I think one of the interesting parts is that you're able to sort of like take that and bring it with you. Like it's kind of funny. I always keep telling this, like, one of the secrets that I have is that, if there is like a kind of like, problem that we haven't seen on my group, we haven't seen on scale, like, or whatever we're working on. Essentially, I have unpaid consulting because, like, these guys here on the podcast are my friends, and I just pose a question. It's like, hey, how do you do this on Spring? And then Michael will go in, poke Josh Lawn, and says like, oh, he says to do this, and suddenly something that would have been like, it went from like, this is impossible to do, to like, oh, it's only this 15 things that we need to do, and it's done. There is a lot of that where we're having that network of people. It expands. First of all, it expands your horizon. Second of all, they become your network of trust, where you can help them or they can help you. And if you throw in a question, is nothing for them or us to like answer them. Then the third part is that, that's sort of like how you can start looking at how the other people do their things. And maybe that's the way to find out, going from a place where, a workplace where there might not be a role for you, to getting exposed to all these other, possible, places where you can land, where they have that for you. Like, that's, I think that the biggest life-changing event that I had in my career, I think, was first going to Java 1 as a speaker. I was speaking on Swing, if you remember that. But then, like, I still remember it was Stephen Chin who did like the community keynote, and he was like, go back to your stuff, get to the user group, volunteer, make it bigger, make it great. And this was like, 10, 15 years ago. And just doing that, suddenly I met this usual suspects here. Like, I first met Bob, and then I met Michael. And then out of that, then essentially I start meeting Billy and Chandra and everybody else in the community, just because of sort of like that chain reaction. So biggest effect, I think, in my career was getting involved in the community, and how that sort of like catapulted me into like, understanding and essentially getting to that next level in software development.
Yeah, getting involved in the community and just kind of getting started with like your local Java users group. We're all, I think most of us here help run a Java users group, and it kind of means a lot if you could just show up, regularly. Like that actually can mean a lot, just because for all the effort we put in organizing, getting speakers, getting hosts, and all that set up, it kind of at least means something when people are regularly coming there. But then it's also a great place to kind of build a network of people who have similar interests but are outside of your organization. It can be good just to have what you were saying, Freddie, in case to bounce some ideas off of. But it also can be good if suddenly life comes at you fast, and you might find yourself needing to look for a new job. Not that I have any recent experience with that. To actually have that network outside of your organization. At least that's one of the things I also kind of did when moving between organizations or getting involved in community, is with that in mind. Just because if something happens at the organization, no matter what it might be, no matter how secure your position you think it might be, or how good the organization might be, you might find out like the CEO is like embezzling money, and then you're like, oh, we actually have no more money, and like you're just immediately out of a job. It's kind of good to have that community outside, or that network outside of your organization, to kind of reach out to if needed.
I'm assuming Billy is not implying that the CEO of IBM
No,
was
not saying that. I'm just saying,
just for clarity.
Yeah, exactly.
He's not an employee anymore. It's okay.
Yeah, exactly. I just say that even if you're at like a smaller place, like the first place I worked at I was there for 7 years. It's like, oh, I could probably work there for an entire career, but you just never know. You just never know if markets can change, or like I said, it could just be a case where something's going on that they're like, and you just suddenly find yourself out of a job, or needing a new job. That it's good to have network outside of your people you work with, because they may also be looking for a job right then as well, so they can't be that helpful at that point.
No, so to add to Billy's point, right? Not just with the dark scenarios that you just presented, even otherwise, why not network? Why not reach out to people and be a leader to them? So, you are either get made aware of new opportunities, or you can help them be aware of new opportunities. It's absolutely great to just do that. Just go connect. There's no harm.
And then I think we're lucky enough. Like if you work on the Java ecosystem and that's something you decided that you want to make your career on, like the Java community is you.
I think we lost
Did we
Freddie.
lose
Yeah, I
Freddie?
think we did
Yeah.
lose Freddie. Okay, I was wondering if it was me or if it was.
Nope.
He does have a very cute picture right now.
Yeah, no. Let's
Yeah.
let's expand
Very
it.
good one. Screenshot it.
There's the thumbnail for this episode right there.
Exactly.
All right.
And he's back.
Freddie's back.
Oh
He's
gosh!
back.
He's back.
He rebooted. It's like,
Not that fast.
Did I do the max headroom thing where it's like just
No, you weren't shaking. It was just like not very flattering. You were just stuck
You
mid
were very pouty.
talking.
oh gosh. All right. Never mind. Let's reel it in. But yeah, no, if essentially as a community, the Java ecosystem is amazing. So if you happen to be there, if you want to make your career out of that, then just definitely leverage the community, be part of it, contribute to it, and I'm sure that you get 10 times more of out of it than when you put it in, because that's how this community works.
Agreed.
If you haven't started getting part of the community yet, get started with an open source project. That's where you have to start.
Yeah.
Hey,
and
you've got some great representation right here. You got the
Oh,
Chicago
gosh,
Java
yeah.
user group, the New York, the New Jersey, and the Kansas City groups. Come join one of us.
Yep.
They know what's up.
yeah.
No doubt. But yeah, I mean, I think, I think it speaks to your employers, when they see you doing these things outside of work and being able to contribute. And the other thing is these are more durable things because these organizations, open source projects, they generally last longer than our careers do at specific companies.
Yep.
So, I mean, to be able to point to something that's available online, open, and say, yeah, I did that. And you can actually look and see the email communication. I work well with other people. I'm able to influence people that have absolutely no incentive to do anything that I say, except that it's good for the project. That's, just to tie it into a lot of the things, the influencing and the ability to say no. You get a lot of that in these communities, working with diverse groups of people that have no other interest career-wise other than they want to do something cool.
Yep. Agreed.
Yeah, no, and I think that I think we're past the hour mark, so we're just gonna do like closing thoughts on this, and it's the last thing I was just gonna add there is it's okay, like we've been talking about like that this talking and communication skills are important to move to the next level. And being part of the community is another way to sort of like springboard on that. The thing I'm gonna say is like if you see yourself like, oh my gosh, I never talked in front of people, oh my god, I have no idea how to get there. A lot of these are skills that you can acquire. Like like if you have meet me in person, you know that I'm a natural extrovert. But here's I'm gonna spill a little secret where some of the people in this group are not extroverts, but they learn. Okay, he gave himself away, so I'm fine with it now.
Among developers.
A complete introvert. Yep.
Yeah, but this it is one of those where you sort of like learn how to interact, and it is not something that is gonna take your soul away. I get energized. I actually ready to do more stuff when I'm with a group of people. But my say like, you know what, it was good for a day. I'm gonna take a break. I'm gonna read a book or watch a movie, and I'm done. But it's something
Freddie,
that
if you don't mind, can I interrupt real quick?
Yes.
If it's easy, why bother doing it, right? If you find it hard to go talk to people, you should go talk to people. Go do it, because that's something you're not good at or you feel you're not good at. Do more of it. So put yourself in those situations. Yes, you can still remain an introvert, but you've got to project yourself as a leader at some point in order to make a mark, either within your organization or in a larger community to gain some impact. So do it. I mean, that's how
Yeah.
I did it. I'm a hardcore introvert myself. I don't like to talk to people when I can avoid it. But I made it a point to go talk to everybody. Hey, I came and spiked your drinks. Why would I do
that? Virtually too. I still don't understand how that happened, but for those who don't know, there's a big joke. Okay, so it depends. I consider it a fact. Chandra considers it like fake news. But we're in a party somewhere, and I think Chandra spiked one of my drinks. I'm short about it. I still remember this. But yeah, so yeah. In short. Like there are other skill sets besides being a great developer. Like and those are learnable skills. They might not be the easiest skill to learn, but they usually guarantee that you move up the echelons. Like it's they are. I have seen like principles that are still on the quiet side, but in terms of percentage, it's probably just like 5%. The other 95% are usually very great communicators, and that's how they sort of like climb that sort of like career ladder. So keep trying it out. Okay, any last words from the group?
Yeah, I was going to say, just again, Java user groups are a great way to get started on both, again, meeting other people and also speaking. So definitely reach out to your jug leaders or just start attending because that's just a great way to get started, and it's pretty easy. Hopefully you have one local as well.
What Billy said. In addition, learn to say no, learn to say yes when required, communicate. Just be open with how you feel about things. Talk to the people. Do not be scared. Just say your piece. Say it politely, but say your piece.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, with that, I think we conclude episode 59 of Java OffHeap. This is, Freddie signing off.
This is Bob signing off. Thanks for having us again, DevNexus, and especially thanks Chandra and Billy for being on the show today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Signing off. Thanks for having us.
Michael signing off. Glad to be back at DevNexus, and follow us on on Twitter at OffHeap.
And Billy, any last words?
That's all I have.
Critique says the party's just getting started.
Hopefully we'll be able to do this all in person next year.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
All right, bye. All right,
Thanks.
I'm going to stop the recording.